The Young Bucks are out here learning, and vibes near the end of the season are feeling a lot better than they usually have in past seasons.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Thank you for tuning in, as you always do, here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. We'll have more on Game Time in a little bit, but I wanted to go back to a comment that happened over the weekend that Liover Peguero had about this Pittsburgh Pirates team, talking about the simple things. It came after he had a tag out of Ronald Acuna as Ronald Acuna was trying to steal second base. And he exclaimed in the clubhouse after the game to the bullpen catcher of the Pittsburgh Pirates that we're out here learning. This was only a few days ago. And yes, this young Pirates team is learning. And I think that's very important to remember when you're watching this rendition of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I think it's very important to remember when we're heading into next season about the Pittsburgh Pirates, because Liover Peguero is among a huge group of, let's just be honest, kids on this Pittsburgh Pirates team that are still trying to figure out the game of Major League Baseball. They've been playing baseball their whole lives, but they're not playing Major League level baseball up until they get up to that point. And they're just now figuring it out. And the vibe around the Pirates is different than what we've had in the past couple of seasons. And it might not be or feel like a lot, folks. It really might not. But Pittsburgh has improved a lot this season. And this year has been defined by the young players. In the first half of the year, you can make the argument that Carlos Santana and Rich Hill were a big reason why this team was winning games. Well, they're both gone now. They've been gone for some time, yet the Pirates are still winning baseball games. And they're doing it because of the likes of Mitch Keller, Johan Oviedo, Liover Peguero, Ke'Bryan Hayes, Brian Reynolds, Ji-Hwan Bae, Joshua Palacios, Colin Selby. Any of these young players that you want to name on this team are helping this team win baseball games and changing the vibe in the clubhouse day by day. Now, obviously, they lost last night. They currently sit at 66-78. Not the craziest record in the world, but up to this point last year, folks, they were 36 games below 500 last year. 36 games below 500. That is not a joke. That's we know that. They lost 100 games last year. And now you look at where this team sits, they're already 4 games better than they were last year, and they still have a lot of baseball to go in this entire month of September. And for these young guys, too, these games that they're playing right now are all against very good teams. I mean, you look at the Nationals, they are record-wise worse than the Pirates, but they've been a scrappy team like the Pittsburgh Pirates have been all season. You look at the New York Yankees, who they have next on Roberto Clemente weekend. They were another very good team going into this year. Expectations haven't been met the way they wanted them to be met. But now they've called up Jason Dominguez and a lot of their young guys and have started playing baseball a lot better as of late. And there's playoff teams all around after this. You've heard me say it. You have Philadelphia, you have Miami, you have Chicago, you have Cincinnati. All teams that are trying to get into the postseason that the Pirates are going to be playing down the stretch of the year. And all this does for these guys is introduce them to what competitive baseball is going to look like if this team, the Pittsburgh Pirates that is, wants to get back to that point that the Phillies, the Reds, Cubs, and Marlins are all fighting for right now. Now, the biggest question that comes out of all of this is, could these games be more of a measuring stick or a learning experience? Well, I'm going to go with the latter, because I don't think you really want to use this current Pirates 28-man roster as a measuring stick of what this team can be. And you can look at the schedule again for yourself, and it's going to only teach these guys how to play against top teams and playoff teams and competitive teams. And it's not even only going to show them what it looks like, but what it's like to play against it. Because guess what? If you want to get into the postseason, you have to beat teams like this. That's what the Pirates are going to have to do the next couple of years, is if they want to get into the postseason, they're going to have to beat teams that are fighting for the playoffs down the stretch of the year. Pirates aren't going to be a 100-something win team like the Braves are probably going to be. They're not going to be the Los Angeles Dodgers and run away with the NL Central. They're going to be a team that is going to be fighting with the likes of Milwaukee, Chicago, and Cincinnati to win that NL Central next year. And maybe even St. Louis if they have a bounce-back season. And not only that, if they don't win the division, then you're talking about fighting with the Marlins. You're talking about fighting with the Phillies, the San Diego Padres, the San Francisco Giants, the Arizona Diamondbacks of the world. The NL is stacked right now, folks. It really is if you look at it from top to bottom. It is a stacked league. It just is. But when you look at what this Pirates team has done on the learning curve, especially in the second half of the season, remember the circumstances that this team is currently dealing with. I mean, practically, you're operating with two starting pitchers, that being Mitch Keller and Johan Oviedo. Those are the guys that you know they're going to pitch every 5 days. Those other 3 games, you don't know who's pitching. It's been Andre Jackson some days. It's been Colin Selby as an opener some days. It's been Thomas Hatch. It's been Bailey Falter. Pirates don't have a starting rotation right now. On top of that, all season, you've been without a preseason projected 3.0 WAR player in O'Neal Cruz, who would probably have been better than that, in my opinion. He probably would have been closer to a 4 WAR. If the Pirates have 4 more wins than they currently did right now, I think the way you look at this season is completely different. And you have an average age on your roster of 26.1, which is the youngest in all of baseball, and many other common roadblocks in the MLB season, especially late. September is always a tough part of the year for a lot of these teams. They're dealing with injuries. Everybody's dealing with injuries right now. The Pirates have dealt with it a lot this year. JT Brubaker, Mike Burrows, O'Neal Cruz, Ke'Bryan Hayes at points, Brian Reynolds at points, Henry Davis more recently, Tucupita Marcano, Ji-Hwan Bae. There's been a lot of things that have gotten in the way of this Pittsburgh Pirates team, but yet somehow, some way, they are still a competitive baseball team. I mean, they took 3 games against the Atlanta Braves over 7 games. Equate that to a playoff series, you forced a Game 7 against the best team in baseball. And only lost 1 series of them out of the 2 because you split the 4-game set. It's good stuff all around. Now, there are things that obviously need to be improved on. There's things that the Pirates are going to have to be better at next year to be a more competitive team and bring that record up some more. But they have a chance to be a double-digit win total improvement team this year, and that shouldn't be understated at all. And at this point in this rebuild that we've had, this young group of players has given the Pirates more optimism than they've seen in this entire rebuild altogether at this point in the year. Even Brian Reynolds has said it that the last couple years, all they've been trying to do is crawl to get to the offseason. This year, there's a real vibe around this team going into next year that if they do the right things in free agency and they do the right things with picking the right roster out of spring training, that this Pirates team could be a competitor in the NL Central in 2024. I firmly believe that if they go out and fix the issues that they have to fix. One of those, of course, being first base, where we saw Jared Triolo get his first ever start at the position yesterday, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys, of course, about Sleeper. Get up to a $100 match on your first deposit on mobile only over at sleeper.com/promo code/locked on, because the MLB playoffs are right around the corner, which means the clock is ticking on your chance to 100 times your cash on daily fantasy baseball. Baseball has never been more exciting than it is now, with studs like Ronald Acuna, Mookie Betts, and Shohei Ohtani. Pick more or less on stats for these stars like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and more for up to a 100 times payout on Sleeper. Get your picks right and you could win big. I love the app. By the way, Brian Reynolds, he's been very good on Sleeper this year. If you want to make some money on some Brian Reynolds props, you can do it. Use promo code Locked On and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. And of course, make sure you go Sleeper. It's great. Enjoy it and go win some money. Welcome back to the second segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Again, as you've seen, the backdrop is a little different. My internet is out in my house again, which is starting to become a issue. I guess my internet operates like the Pirates do. Only works 2 out of the 5 starts. Haha. Anyways, that was a horrible joke, but it's fine. Thank you again for tuning into the show, as you guys always do. You're the best fans a podcast host could ever ask for. And yesterday, I kind of buried it into segment 1, but Jared Triolo, of course, got the start at first base yesterday. And it was something that some people asked for. It was something that I was intrigued to potentially see once Ke'Bryan Hayes returned. And boy, has he been great since he's returned. And Jared Triolo has the glove to play pretty much anywhere if he's given the right teaching and time. Triola, of course, is a 2021 minor league Gold Glove winner and back-to-back Bill Mazeroski Defender of the Year winner. He flew through the ranks, by the way, as a third baseman. We all knew this, but Hayes, of course, is occupying that spot for the foreseeable future, and I don't see that changing whatsoever. Obviously, was signed to the largest contract in Pirates history 2 years ago before Brian Reynolds overtook him this year. But now with Triolo being in the spot that he's in, he needed to find somewhere to play. Triolo has been a pretty interesting player to watch this year. He's batting around the 260s. He got sent down at one point. He's recently come back up, and we've seen him play in multiple spots. Of course, he played 31 games at his traditional third base spot. He's played 8 games at second base and 1 game last night at first base. And we all remember Triolo served very well over at third base in the absence of Ke'Bryan Hayes during his time on the IL. And there was a lot surrounding the idea that Triolo might actually be able to stick there. I never got into that. I knew Ke'Bryan Hayes was going to continue to be the third baseman of the future for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, and I don't see that changing, and there's no reason it should change. And this kind of stuff with Jared Triolo, where you're trying to figure out where you can put this guy to play, well, the fact that he's good enough defensively to practically put him anywhere, I think, is the best thing that comes out of all this for the Pittsburgh Pirates, because it is a tough decision. Where do we play Jared Triolo? Where do you end up putting him? Can you get his bat in the lineup that has played pretty well this year? And last night, of course, was the first time that we saw Triolo play first base at the MLB level. He has done it in spring training. He's done it in the minor leagues. He's done it in pregame routines, but he's never done it at the MLB level. So there was a concern about how well he would perform in this position. And I thought that he did fine. He was tested multiple times over there in his first base debut. Travis Blankenhorn, of course, got him pretty early, tested pretty early in the second inning as he fielded a funky hop ground ball that he handled pretty well. And I mean, at that point, with stuff like that, I'm not so worried about Triolo in that instance, because I know the kid knows how to play defense with ground balls. He knows how to track the ball as well. But when you're playing first base, and he even alluded to this as well last night, when you're playing first base, tracking the ball is a lot different, because for him, usually playing third base, he's going directly to the ball. Whereas on first base, if the ball's across the diamond in the infield, you're obviously going over to first base. So you're going the complete opposite direction of the ball, turning, catching the ball. For Triolo, that's going to feel different at first for him, because that's something that he's just not accustomed to doing that often, especially at first base, because it's just a completely different style of defense when you're playing at first base as opposed to second, shortstop, or third. He was moved to second base after the 7th inning, which is fine. He can play that position as well, as I mentioned earlier. Is he the long-term option at first base? No. I would argue that he's not even close to the long-term option at first base. Can he play the position? Sure. Connor Joe can also play the position. Is he the long-term option at first base? No. Neither is Alfonso Rivas. The Pirates have had issues with first base for a very long time. And Triolo, I think, has proven that he could be a very good utility infielder, which is something that any team would be happy to have on their roster. I mean, when you have a guy that can play third base, shortstop, and second all at a high level, I think that's fine. And he hasn't really played shortstop all that much, but I wouldn't be concerned if he did, just because I think his range with the glove is good enough to play the position. And yeah, I could very well see him playing shortstop. But if he's limited to second base and third base, I see no issue in that either. Ke'Bryan Hayes has proven throughout his career that injuries may be an issue. And to have a guy like Jared Triola where you're not really losing all of the glove, now you are losing some because Ke'Bryan Hayes is the best defensive third baseman in all of baseball, but you're not losing all of it. And you're still getting a very good defensive player over there if Triola was the backup at third base. And then if somebody needs a break at second or there's injuries at second, then you have 2 elite defenders on the field at the same time in Triolo and Hayes. So it's something that I do think fits him very well to be able to play all 4 infield spots in the near future. I think that's what his ceiling is. I think that's what his role for this team moving forward would be. And manager Jared Shelton alluded to it last night as well. He added that Triola would likely see the least playing time at shortstop. So, I'd expect him to move forward and he'll get time at second base and third base primarily. Sometimes you'll probably see him at first base. I don't mind playing him at first base right now, though, down the stretch of the year because it doesn't hurt anything. You're out of playoff contention, and you might as well see, hey, can he learn how to do this in game? Can he do it in the games? And then go throughout the entire offseason. If you really want Jared Triolo to be your first baseman, teach him the position throughout the offseason. Let him figure it out. Because guess what? Just because you're teaching him how to play first base doesn't mean he's going to lose his glove at second or third. It's just how that should be. And I think that works out really well for the Pirates, at least as a short-term Band-Aid. But as we've seen since they've moved on from Josh Bell and Colin Moran, first base has just been a mess for this team for way too long. And I think it's time for them to find a long-term option there. And we were hoping that would be a guy like Mason Martin or a guy like Malcolm Nunez or Matt Gorski even, but we just haven't seen it. And Jared Triolo is just going to add to the list of guys that are trying to play the position. And I don't mind the decision whatsoever. I just don't think that he is the long-term option at first base. Now, if he plays well over there, proves me wrong, great. I would take that all day. I just don't see Jared Triolo as the future of the first base position for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I really, right now, don't see anybody on the roster that is a future for the first base position for this Pittsburgh Pirates team. We're going to get into Ke'Bryan Hayes and his comments about officiating and robo-umpiring in the final segment of today's show. But before we do that, let's talk about Game Time, not FanDuel, but this episode's also brought to you by FanDuel too. But Game Time, download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off because buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. And download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. And download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And welcome back to the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast. And loyal third segment listeners, thank you so much for always tuning into this show, as you always do. And something that I'm sure will be a conversation for at least the next couple seasons before I feel it is eventually implemented across all parts of baseball is the robo-umpire conversation. The robot umpires are already being tested at the AAA level. They've been tested at minor league levels all over the place, and the rule changes have been tested all over there. So why not robo-umpires? And we already know what happened over the weekend. Ke'Bryan Hayes, of course, spoke publicly about his frustrations with officiating this season prior to the National Series. And it was expected. Bill Miller, of course, had the strike call that was called on Ke'Bryan Hayes. It was a 3-1 count. Hayes flipped his bat expecting a walk because it should have been a walk. And it was called a strike. He strikes out on the next pitch. And Hayes had this to say about it afterwards. No accountability. Bring the ABS, please, was the sentiment, of course, from Hayes on Twitter/X following the game. And to no one's surprise, Ke'Bryan Hayes declined further comments on this, by the way. And he stated that his social media post was the extent of his thoughts on the matter. Understandable. Now, you don't see players often publicly talk about officiating in baseball just because they know a fine will happen or any number of things could happen. And a lot of these guys don't make the money that NFL players make or NBA players make, where they can basically say whatever they want and the fine, it won't matter because they just know that the fine is just pocket change to them. And for Ke'Bryan Hayes, with the contract that he signed last year, yeah, a fine is pretty much going to be all he's probably going to get, and maybe a 1-game suspension for publicly diminishing officiating. And that's what I would expect. But we all follow Umpire Scorecard on Twitter. Trust me, we've been displeased with a lot of these scorecards on the Pirates side. But I do want to preface that this is an issue all across baseball. The Pirates are not the only team that is not getting calls, but they are one of the teams based off of Umpire Scorecard's metrics that are getting screwed over quite a bit this season. The Pirates have a negative 2.41 total favor from umpires via Umpire Scorecards, which ranks 17th in all of baseball. The highest favor goes to the Mets, by the way. This is just kind of so you can see the disparity. The highest favor goes to the Mets at 21.68, and the lowest goes to the Nationals at 33.19, negative 33.19, that is. But the stat that I think is more glaring, and the statistic that I think matters just a little bit more than the total favor, is the total batter impact statistic that Umpire Scorecards uses on their website. You can go check this all out for yourself. And the total batter impact is a sum of the run impact of each missed call when a team is batting for all games played for the team. So basically, every missed call that a team gets, this is the impact that that missed call has on the game. The Pirates in this statistic rank 29th at negative 19.93, just behind the Nationals at negative 21.58. Negative 19.93 total batter impact. That is not a good number, folks. It's not a good number at all. These stats, of course, rely on a general strike zone. Just going to throw that out there, too. But they also showcase the problem. And you've seen a good number of Pirates players show their frustrations this year. You've seen Ke'Bryan Hayes do it most recently. Ji-Hwan Bae has done it this year. There's been a lot of frustration from these Pirates hitters because they do feel like they are getting hosed, for lack of a better word, on a lot of these strike zones. And they are. I mean, you could watch the games and tell that there are just some calls that the Pirates are not getting. And that's on both sides. And there are some times where the Pirates do get the calls, most recently in that Milwaukee Brewers series. It happens on both sides, and it's a problem across all of baseball. And for the Pirates, it's frustration and a feeling of unfairness. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's all it should be. And again, it is rare to see players publicly bash officiating in baseball. But Ke'Bryan Hayes chose to do it. And as I said earlier, I'd expect no less than a fine. But I think he spoke more for the Pirates and for players all across baseball than he did for himself. And robo-umps are going to happen, folks. They are. And it might be sooner rather than later. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Locked On Pirates podcast, as you always do here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube at Locked On Pirates. Make sure you also listen on all of your other podcast platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything the Pirates do for the remainder of the 2023 season. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow.